Alright, so I have another project. Hello. So I want to make a thing that lasts a long time. So glass lasts a long time, and I want to put something inside glass, and the glass will protect it if it's tempered correctly and all that. So step one is to make a glass thing. So I want to make a glass sphere with a hollow void in the middle. Pretty hard, but I've got an idea for how to do it. So if I make it in two halves, and make each half out of sheets of glass that are cut thus and stacked up and fused into one block in my furnace, that should make pretty decent sort of and a sphere of glass with a void in the centre. So I plan for the glassy bits, actual circles, I'm going to make like a bunch of donuts of glass. And sort of the next one will be a slightly smaller outside diameter and a slightly smaller inside diameter. And so you stack these up, stack, and then put a stainless steel bowl inside there, just a small, like I'm thinking inside, this is not really to scale, I'm thinking total outside diameter will be about 100 to 150 mil. And so get them nice and clean, stack them all up, put that dome in there, and then fire them up to about 900 degrees, let it cool at the right rate, soak it, and all that, makes a nice tough glass hemisphere like that. And then I'll do the same here. I'll make 2 or 3 of them. 3? Why 3? Wow. There's a polishing technique that I read about. I can't remember the name. It's like the Whitworth 3-plate method, I think. And the general gist of it is that you can take 3 surfaces. I'm not really going to do it justice, but I'll link a pretty cool article about it. But the basic premise is that if you have 3 bits of material, this is a rough surface, like zoomed in, super close. You've got A, you've got B, and C. If you grind B and C together, like put some very fine grit in here, and you grind them together, then they get smoother, but they can still have irregularities that sort of sync up. Like all you do when you grind those together is you're making that as perfect as that. And if this has got like a valley where this has a hill, it'll have a valley and a hill. It won't be flat. But that's where A comes in. So if you grind B and C together, and then you grind A and C, and then you grind A and B, and then you repeat that, eventually you will get 3 surfaces that are like as close to atomically flat as you can get with relatively crude tools, which is pretty damn cool. So that's my plan. So step 1 is to make the glass. Well, step 0 is to work out a nice reliable way of getting these glass donuts manufactured. I've had a bit of experience with cutting glass, but not curves. Curves are tricky, especially internal curves. I'm not too fussed about, like if I have a square piece of glass, I can score it in a circle and then snap off all this waste. It'll start creating a bunch of waste, but there we're going to do. But then I'll score this internal, and if I do manage to snap all that off without affecting this section, when I score that and try to smash out that little section, I will snap it through there, 100%, no doubt. But because I'm slumping it all into a big blob, it doesn't really matter if it cracks, because this gap here is going to be extremely fine. I mean, it's like broken glass. It's going to be as sharp as you can get. So when I stack it all up, all the cracks will fuse, and it'll all be sweet. So I've done some stuff like that in the past. Like I made my mum, a slumped glass, 2 plates of glass stuck together with some copper wire in there that spelled out the word leaf, and then a eucalyptus leaf in there, and the eucalyptus leaf burned away into a relatively solid chunk of ash, encapsulated within this toughened glass. And I tested it, like I dropped it a metre on the concrete, and it didn't smash, so it must be pretty tough. So once I've got 2 really super duper flat pieces of glass, like this surface here is extremely flat at this point in my imagination, I should be able to get them and ring them together. So that means sliding them together in such a way that you exclude the air inside the 2 pieces as they come together. And the idea is, they come together and they get so close that they're like, I may as well be one piece of glass now. And it's unclear as to exactly what causes this, or whether it actually happens at all. But when you get 2 really flat things close together, they tend to bond together to an extent, to a pretty high extent. So I've read about people who've made really high precision optical lenses out of really good glass, and they've left them sitting together, and they've turned into one piece of glass. And they've tried to take off the top piece and left chunks of the top piece of glass on the bottom piece because those sections fuse together. So that's my hope, to get this all flat as possible and then ring 2 of them together and see what happens. So inside, as for what's going to go inside the void in here, inside the hole of the donut, I don't know. Initially, my goal is to get this situation going, but my eventual goal is to put Wikipedia in there. That's far-fetched, I'll admit. My general plan for that to happen, well, I'll take a step back. The purpose for this is to make something that lasts a very long time. So I could put a flower or something in there, or I could buy a cheap vacuum chamber and make it such that there's a vacuum in there and whatever goes inside lasts for a very long time. And if I do the glass properly, and the bond works as well as I think it might, and no air gets in, then whatever I put in there will be in there until the glass smashes. And if I make this, let's say 60 millimeters thick glass, that's pretty tough. And if I temper it correctly, it'll last a very long time. One thing I might note is the reason I'm making it in 2 halves and then joining the halves together is because I want to have the option of putting stuff inside there that won't cope with 900 degrees Celsius. It's quite hot. A lot of things will burn at that temperature. So yeah, I want to put Wikipedia in there. So the way I'm thinking of doing that is a small, probably polycrystalline solar panel, feeding a very simple circuit, as simple as I can get it for reliability's sake. It'll charge up a supercap and a board with probably an FPGA. I've run out of space to write the full acronym. FPGA because they last a lot longer in... Okay, let's take a step back. What's going to kill Wikipedia inside the sphere, aside from heat, shock, all that stuff? It's going to be cosmic rays, it's going to be radiation, it's going to be stuff that will corrupt the data stored in it. The best option I've got for data storage at the moment that I've found is just flash storage plus error correction. So my plan is to use, in general, stuff that's really proof against radiation, stuff that doesn't get rot easily. FPGAs are good for that, or at least better than microcontrollers, because they don't store their programming in DRAM or RAM or flash. They store it in the physical structure. So there's an extremely crude, idealized view of an FPGA, but if you think of them as a grid, and when you program them, you don't write some instructions into a register and some memory. You physically put some volts in here, and that fuses, that sets a piece of hardware, essentially. It's a lot more rigorous a set than writing a piece of memory would be. So that makes them slightly more resistant to radiation damage. So the problem with radiation damage, if you don't know, is if you've got the standard bit of memory, it's pretty shoddy, and you've got 1, 0, 1, 0, and you get a cosmic ray that comes in, and there's some gas and clouds and such up here. And a cosmic ray comes in from space and goes, poof! Like, this is traveling at like 80% the speed of light. Let's change that to 0.1 and see. So it comes in, and then there's this shower of crap, protons and neutrons and all sorts of other garbage. And one of these comes along, goes dook, and changes that to a 0, and you bug it. Like, your memory is right off then, unless you've got lots of good error correction. So that problem affects programs stored in, let me check the camera's still recording. Sick, it is. That affects programs stored in microcontrollers, but it affects FPGAs less. So, regulation circuitry, solar panel into there, into a capacitor to get some power. And so it'll do this opportunistically. When the solar panel gets enough power, it'll start charging up the cap, so it'll boot up the FPGA when it gets enough power. Probably only going to run for a minute or two at a time. That's fine. I just want something in here. I don't want an actually connected Wikipedia useful thing. I just want something that's pretty cool. So I'm thinking just a very simple LCD for readout, maybe a matrix display, maybe a fancy 10-segment display or something very reliable that can be written to from the FPGA. And then I need to store the data somewhere. And in order to store a decent chunk of Wikipedia, I'll need to compress it. And so I'll need to have the compression smarts in the FPGA and then somewhere to store the data. So my present line of thinking is as follows. So here's Y, X, Z axes. Actually, that's going to annoy me. So my line of thinking with the storage is to have 3 flash storage chips, probably, if I'm being honest, micro SD cards, because they're quite easy to work with, and orient them, this is not to scale obviously, on 3 different planes. So each one is perpendicular to the other. And this is to limit the damage from radiation. I think this makes sense. So if you're looking at the 3 cards, you'll have one that looks like that, one that looks like that, and one that looks like that, if you're viewing it from any one perspective. And so these ones are very unlikely to be hit by any beam that's coming into the whiteboard like that. This one, it's had it. It's going to cop some of that radiation that hits it. But the other 2 are oriented edge on to the beam, so are less likely to take damage. I don't know if this is actually correct. I'll probably have to run some simulations or work it out actually with maths, which is much harder. I'm an engineer, I write simulations and hope for the best. So my line of thinking with that is that if you've got 3 copies of the data and your FPGA is booting up, before you do a read, you can read the same bit or the same byte from each storage, and the one you read out as the authoritative piece of data is the one that agrees between the 2. And then you write that to the one that disagrees, and you've just repaired some damage, assuming the flash card is damaged in a way that's repairable. Sometimes a bit can flip from a 0 to a 1, sometimes the sector is damaged and you just can't store more data to that. That's inevitable. These will degrade over time. But I think this arrangement will get the most out of flash storage. Possibly. I'm very willing to be wrong about this. I haven't really thought it through very well. So the way it would work is that storage, FPGA would pick a random file on the storage and then a random file. When I say file, I mean chunk of storage. I don't know what file system I'll be using. And then it will decompress that and then start reading an article, and it will display that Wikipedia article 1 word at a time on the screen. In this case, it's displaying the Wikipedia article for butts. There's some options for control, like if you've got an input to the system, which is the solar panel. So if you briefly cover the solar panel and take your hand away, that can be interpreted as an input to the system. and you can do stuff based on that, skip to the next article or whatever. And the other thing it could do with its spare time while it's playing out an article is go through the storage and do error correction. So pick a chunk, pick a sector of the storage and do that process. So read the same sector from 3 different places, the 2 that agree. If the third one disagrees, then write the agreed chunk of storage, the agreed byte to the one that disagrees. And so over time, in certain damage modes, you'll be able to recover your data. Possibly, I don't know. But that's the idea. So I've got a bunch of lead sheet, and the only thing that needs to be outside the lead sheet is the display and the solar panel. Everything else can be wrapped up nice and tight in a good 3 or 4 millimeters of lead. We should do a pretty good job at protecting stuff. There's a number of other things that cause problems to electronics long term, like lead whiskers and just oxidative damage and all that stuff, but radiation is definitely the biggest problem to deal with. And so that's my plan. So step 1, see if I can make glass donuts. Step 2, fuse them into a hemisphere. Step 3, polish the surface super duper flat. Step 4, ring them together. Step 5, put things inside, see how that goes. And this is sort of very long term. There's going to be a lot of problems involved here. Choosing the right flash storage, choosing the right compression and file system and error correction routines and all that. This circuitry stuff, probably not that hard. It'll be a matter of finding components that'll last the longest. And it may be that I have to scale this back down to, well, at least initially to a solar panel that charges up a capacitor that flashes a LED. That might be the first version. But the goal is to make something cool that can be left in the middle of a field for 400 years, and then when picked up after the collapse of society, someone could look at it and go, ooh, butts. Bye-bye.